Welcome to the 8th edition of Viper Voices. Graham Turnbull here with you. Very pleased to be joined by former Vernon Viper captain, number 12, Riley Brandt. Riley, thanks for taking the time.
Graham, thanks for having me.
It's been a very cool thing, sort of a spoiler alert to some of the people watching. We interviewed a couple weeks ago with Jagger Williamson. You ended up having a chat with Jagger Williamson, and all of a sudden being on this podcast has been the hottest thing. I've had messages. Hey, when's my turn to get on the show? When are you going to have me? And you were at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw he was over for dinner, too. I was like, come on here. Get me going. Let's go.
Wow, 6-hour commute. I mean, you're always welcome, but the 6-hour commute might not want to. Let's go back. I mean, it's a very casual sort of conversation that we like to have, but it's very cool to catch up with former Vipers, what they went through to get to where they were. And so the Viper fans, of course, only have a window to watch you, in this case, 3 years. But there's a lot more to the story than that, and we're going to sort of break it down. But talk about minor hockey and trail. I mean, you're from there. For those who haven't been there, small community, but very passionate. Lots of great hockey players have rolled through there. What's the minor hockey system like out in trail?
Well, you know what? Growing up, it kind of changed. I was in the midst of the change, so there's Roslyn, there's trail, and then there's Montrose and Fruitvale too. So they're all kind of blended in, and everybody would kind of say you're from trail. But like when I first was growing up, Beaver Valley had a team too, right? So there was the Beaver Valley Nighthawks. That was like a minor hockey team. And then there was trail. So we would always go against each other. And then eventually, I think before my time, Roslyn had commuted into trail. So we were already with Roslyn, right? So all the Roslyn kids came down and played in trail. And we would go against teams like Castlegar, Nelson, and all in the general area. And then Fruitvale and Montrose were the big underdogs, right? That's the team we would always want to play. And then eventually after time, the amalgamation hit, and around Bantam, we got all the players from Montrose, and that's when the minor hockey got real good, right? Everybody started getting, the teams were getting better. Everybody was put together because it got to the point where Montrose and Fruitvale, they didn't have enough kids playing, so they would, trail was always have 2 or 3 teams, and then it wasn't fair for Montrose. So after the amalgamation, everybody kind of came together. And then one time we made it, I think our Bantams year was when our first, the amalgamation happened, and we made it all the way to the provincials, and that had never really, or the provincial semifinal too. So it was pretty good.
And I mean, the crazy part about that too, I mean, it's easy for us. I mean, when we've gone down there as a team, generally stay in Castlegar, it's 20 minutes away. So you've got Castlegar 20 minutes away. You've got trail. Montrose is right there. You go through Roslyn, depending on which way you get to trail, coming from Vernon. You've got Nelson and Beaver Valley and Fruitvale, as you say, all these places. I mean, they're only separated by, 5, 10, 15 minutes? So what's the competition level like? I mean, when you get the amalgamation going on, had to be quite a bit of competition from guys that you played against. Now, all of a sudden, some of them are your teammates. You still have to – I mean, what was that process like?
Yeah, it's different too, looking – everything, like you said, is in an hour radius within trail. So, I have buddies in Nelson too that are my best friends that I have played against my entire life, right? And same with Castlegar too. But the thing, it was definitely weird, all those guys coming down to the Fruitvale, and now all of a sudden we're all on the same team, right? I still remember clear as day games in Roslyn, playing against the Beaver Valley team, and that just hasn't happened for so long now, it was definitely a different culture, and it made it a lot better too, because then eventually they all started coming down to our high school and stuff, right? There's only one high school now for all of them. So by the time we got to high school, we were already, had been playing for a couple of years together and stuff. So, it definitely made our relationship with outside of trail a lot bigger now, and it's like Connor and Kellen Jones, right? They're from Montrose, not from trail, but you would never really know that growing up, right? You would always think they're from trail, but no, there's a lot of good hockey players too that came out of Montrose and Fruitvale, not just trail. They're all, but now I guess you would say it's blended. I played for the Nighthawks too, right? So that's 15 minutes away. It's basically home. So yeah,
it's a crazy thing too. I mean, there have been lots of great hockey players. You said recently, in the last 15 years. But, I mean, the grocery store is named after a family that is pretty impactful from trail. And a guy like Ray Ferraro, who's on national television, still sings the praises of what it was like to grow up in that community and play hockey in that community before moving on to the Western Hockey League. I mean, it's one of those things. We show up on a Saturday, there's been minor hockey at the Cominco Arena all day leading up to that. I mean, it seems like, I mean, obviously there are lots of other things that are the backbone of the economy and the livelihoods and whatnot, but hockey in that area, I mean, boy, oh boy, that really seems like it brings the entire community together.
Yeah, and it's definitely the backbone of the community. Like growing up, it was always called the home of champions, and like everybody seems to come around hockey, and that's where it's always been. Like the Smoke Eaters were always the team growing up, and then you got the Nighthawks and Beaver Valley and stuff too, right? So, everybody kind of just came together around hockey, and that's what this town's all about. Like everybody, like now that the Smoke Eaters are doing a lot better too, you see the town coming, they got thousands of fans coming out to the game and stuff. So, everybody loves it. And I think that, bringing in all the teams and stuff, especially at a younger age now, like has built for a better program throughout the course of trail, right?
Well, let's sort of walk through the process. We generally do this. You're, say, in Bantam, 14, 15 years old. We've talked to a lot of people about the fork of the road. What are you going to do? Are you going to go to the Western League? Did you get drafted? Are you going to go play Junior A? Being from trail, was your goal to always sort of play for the Smoke Eaters and within that league? I mean, walk us through, behind the scenes of the Brandt family as you're sort of playing minor hockey. We know you end up playing midget AAA for the Kootenay Ice, but what sort of processes and thoughts and decisions did you and your family have to make at such a young age for you to decide where you were going to play next?
Yeah, see, that was a tough year. You're adjusting, and it was always like when you always knew going through minor hockey, like the next step was just the Bantam rep team, or the next step was just the midget rep, or Pee Wee rep team. But once you got up into that midget area, you had midget AA, and then you had the AAA that everybody wanted to be a part of, right? But then, so you'd play your 1 year there, and usually for everybody after they play their 1 year, because the Kootenay Ice has never really been that good, so you kind of really want to get out of there and go play junior hockey, throw on the visor and get out there when you're 16. And the best part about it is the competition at that time throughout my age group was so high. Everybody was playing, right? All my buddies have been playing, but only 2 people could make the local Nighthawks team. And at that time, 16 years old, I wasn't really built enough to be able to play for the Smoke Eaters. It was just go to their camps because they would try to get out the local guys, right, and get them out and skating and whatnot. But everybody at my age was competing for the 2 spots on the Nighthawks, and those were tough times because it was deciding whether or not playing Junior B is something I want to do, or do I want to develop another year and play another year major midget, right? And then it comes down to price, right? Like playing major midget was $7,000 for a year, and then like Junior B is only like $300 or $400, right? So, but that was a crazy time. And then eventually that year they brought in my 16-year-old year. They brought in a Connor Brown-Malowski, who ends up being the captain at Trail. They brought him in from Kamloops. So then there was only one local for a local spot. And Terry Jones is the coach, right? So he's always been good on getting local guys in. There's usually always 2 local, 16-year-old guys that are going to come in and play for the Nighthawks. And, Connor was a great player, so he brought him in, and that left it down to 1 spot. And fortunately, I was able to get that, but it was tough. I was beating out 4 or 5 of my best buddies, like walking out of that room, and they got to go back and play major midget for another year and only win 3 games. And, and for some people, that could be the worst thing ever, is going out and playing Junior B, because then that not the worst thing ever, but just not the best for your career development. Like some people just ended up liking the Junior B lifestyle, and that's all they did. They just wrote it out. For me, like I would like to develop, so going to Junior B was what I wanted to do, right? But like a couple other people, would have benefited a lot more from staying back in major midget. And like a good example of that's like my buddy Jake Lucchini. He never made it as a 16-year-old for the Junior B team, like his 2 other buddies did. And so he stayed behind and played a year major midget with me. And now next thing you know, he escalated that year, right? He had like 90 points or something, right? So, it was cool to see how growing up, we were all on the same team. And then it got to the point where we're all competing for spots throughout the junior programs in our area, right? So it was cool.
Well, and I mean, I'm just taking a look at the numbers. The 1 year that you played the midget AAA in 38 games. I mean, again, that program, I mean, as you said, sort of struggles, not very successful in terms of wins and losses. Lots of good players sort of rolling through there, but, not enough to sustain wins. How much did, point production for you. I mean, 4 goals, 2 assists, 38 games. You get the spot on Beaver Valley that you wanted. I mean, how much did you put into the success in terms of that point production in Major Midget as you're, again, trying to get that spot?
Yeah, and I think another thing too comes with the confidence of even just making that team, like it made me feel like just different, going to high school now, you're the 16-year-old on the junior team, right? So it motivated me into work a lot harder and realize that, holy smokes, like I can actually get out there and, maybe do something with this game and like turn it into something. So I feel like that was a turning point in my development. Like I thought that's where I started focusing a lot more on my hockey, right? Was when I was 16 and I knew that I could do something with it. There's always times where you look back and you think that you could have done a lot more, but that was definitely like a big point for me, was making that team. And it made me go from just a guy that would go out on the ice to just focus on hitting guys and stuff, to try to develop my game a little bit more, and that's what Terry Jones was such a good coach at too, is trying to get people out of their box, like working on other types of things in the game. And playing junior B was so good too, because at that time I got to experience work playing against guys that were 20, 21 years old when I was only 15. I'm a late birthday. So it was just like, it was so cool to be able to, and guys in the room too that are 21 leading you and telling you what to do, that have been playing this game, like the junior game, for so long, and I'm just coming out of it sitting in the stands eating candy, right? So it was definitely, that was a big turning point in my career and my development for me as a player.
Turned out to be a pretty good season for you. Again, I've got the numbers here, for a 16-year-old, 10 goals, 17 assists, 27 points, 49 games with the Nighthawks, who I imagine at the time were probably a pretty good hockey team, and we will talk about them again. They're following, but it was a pretty good junior B season for you, all things considered. The Smoke Eaters, though, they're not a very good hockey team at the time, but you are an AP with them. You get into 3 hockey games. Sort of growing up, did you always want to be a Smoke Eater? We talked to a lot of local guys, whether it's in Vernon or wherever their hometown is. They've sort of got that allure to go and play for their hometown team. Did you have that right away, and was, at the time, as a 16-year-old, getting on the Smoke Eaters something that you really wanted to do?
Yeah. See, at that time too, there was so much animosity between the Nighthawks and the Smoke Eaters. They didn't like each other at that time. So like Terry and the coach of the Smokies they weren't on the same page, right? And eventually time came around and everybody's healed and everything's good. But at this time, everybody was, on their own page. And so playing for the Nighthawks, but also having this diehard passion to play for the Smokies, but having the buddies on my Nighthawks team giving me oh, you're going to go play for the Smoke Eaters today, like it was tough, but I just stuck with it because growing up, like my grandpa and my dad all had played for Trail, and that was just something that I wanted to do, right? It was playing for the Smoke Eaters was the end goal, and that's always what I ever wanted to do. And that year too, there was a big thing with the whole bus situation. We were all standing in front of the bus, and then I had to go and play with the Smoke Eaters the next day. So, I had tried my best to juggle with being on the Nighthawks at the time and being on playing for the Smoke Eaters. But you know what? I got so much experience that year, and that's another thing too that benefited my time, was playing both for the Nighthawks and the Smoke Eaters at the time.
Well, I guess you're playing for one good team. Like Beaver Valley had a good team that year. The Trail Smoke Eaters weren't very good that year. So I guess you'd literally go from one extreme to the next. You're a high-flying offensive team, and now you're going up against, junior A talent on a team that was struggling. I mean, you kind of had to be at your best both nights, but the results would probably be quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was cool too. Like that was coming in there, you didn't really have anything to prove. You just come out and you just play your game. You show up to the Smoke Eater rink and you're playing against your family and your friends, and they're excited to watch you play your first Trail Smoke Eater game. It's like a kid playing in the NHL. My first ever Smoke Eater game was in Vernon too, and my first shift, I remember everything about it. And so it was, it was so cool being able to do both of them, and then at the same time bringing back, because playing junior A too, Trail at the time, they were a bad team, but they still had players that went on to play very good levels of hockey, right? So even just taking the knowledge and experience from those guys and trying to bring it to, my game on the ice, right? When I was going back and playing junior B was the best thing I could do.
you cracked the roster the next year. So 2013-14, the year the Vipers host the national championship, you cracked the Smoke Eater roster. So there you go, mission accomplished. You get 33 games in. Again, the team's not all that good. You get 11 points in those 33 games. Before we talk about what comes afterwards, what was that first real foray like for you? Again, you went from a team that won a lot of games. Now you're on a team that win very many games. What was that process like? And sort of walk us through I guess you'd call it a rookie campaign of your 33 games of trail.
Yeah, so, getting in there, me and a Vernon local, Blaine Caton, were competing to the last two spots. And thankfully I got it. And, I have never been so happy, and going home telling my parents it was the best thing ever. But we had known that the team was struggling at the time, right? And throughout it, it was definitely a battle, but I was just trying to take the most out of it. Going to these tournaments like the Showcase as a 17-year-old, you hadn't been there before. You'd only heard it from your buddies that had done it in the past, right? So it was just going there and seeing all these scouts and all this just massively different environment compared to junior B was just such a change. And, it just trying to soak it all in when you're that young and listen to the guys, that are older and that are 20 years old that are telling you that the time's going to fly by, and I think that was the best part about it, regardless of how tough it was throughout our season, and then eventually we had a coaching change, which was probably one of the best things that could have ever happened for me. But at the same time, like the coach that I had was the one that brought me in and loved me. So getting a new coach kind of flipped everything and made me lose track of my confidence a little bit. But then eventually, like we'll talk about after going on, it came back to me, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, after 33, you end up going back to Beaver Valley. I mean, we don't need to discuss necessarily the logistics of how that worked. Obviously, though, it was a tough decision to end up going back. But I guess that's sort of an advantage that, the Junior B franchises had, is that they were so close that anytime there was an opportunity to bring in a talented junior A player, they probably did it. But for you, a great opportunity to play. And boy, oh boy, I mean, the team goes on, wins the national championship in Junior B. You couldn't write their script. Sort of walk us through the decision to end up moving back to Junior B, but how fun the run was, whether it's the Junior B national championship, it doesn't matter. I mean, It sounds like a heck of a fun time.
Yeah, and that was definitely a year of different experience. I was in trail, right? And then all of a sudden the coach doesn't want me to be there anymore. So he decides for me to go back and play junior B. And at the time that was tough for me to take in. I was leaving the group of guys that I had been with for the half a year. And that's where I thought I was going to be with until I was 20 years old, so leaving there was kind of tough, but I knew what I was going back to. I knew I was going back to junior B and the team that I was playing with the year before. And thankfully too, we were bringing back another big player for us, Dan Holland, who the year before was on the Smokies, and then he came back too. But we just knew that we had a really good team coming in, so we wrote it out. And at that time too, I was still playing for Trail, so I would be playing for Trail, but for the Nighthawks, and Trail still would like me to AP, so I would come back and play games for Trail too. So I was getting the best of both worlds. And then finally Trail season ended and we had our playoff run, and we won against Kamloops in the KIJHL finals. And we just knew that we were going to take it all the way. And then unfortunately that year too, we lost a really good friend of ours in this town. So that was something that we all built around, and we came together to build it as a little bit of confidence for us. And then we went to the Cyclone Taylor Cup, which was in Nelson, and that was the best thing ever. That was like having it close to home, right? Everybody came over for the games, and in the finals we were down, I think, like 3-0 or something, and Dallas Calvin came back, scored a couple goals, and we ended up winning. And then we go all the way to Vancouver, and we just put on a show there. I think the closest game was like 6-0 that we, so that whole entire run though was just like, I still look at pictures to this day of it and like look at all the trophies that we had, all the guys like that were there, and like how things have changed since then. But like, that was definitely one of the coolest experiences in my life. And regardless, like you said, if it's junior B or anything, I still got to hoist a trophy over my head when I was playing junior hockey. And that's all I ever really wanted to do, right? So yeah, that whole year was such a uphill battle, but I think the best thing I took out of it was that like no matter what happens, there's always going to be something that's going to happen good again, right? So I don't know. It was a weird year for me, but like I guess it worked out pretty good.
Well, and you get to, at the end of the day, you get some nice bling from it too, right? The
Yeah,
championship ring. And what's interesting about that season too was that in 2013-14, Dallas Calvin started with the Vipers.
yeah.
You know, as a recruit, ended up leaving and going back to Junior B. Then he AP'd in the Viper playoff run. I distinctly remember him playing in some games, and then obviously wins the national championship. And I think he participated in the national championship back in Vernon when they were hosting. What was it like to play with the kid? Because you guys end up having nearly reversed roles. I mean, I know he played for the Smoke Eaters after, and you were the Viper guy, so you guys sort of switched roles a little bit. But what was the dynamic like, maybe for the playoff run as well, for a guy like Dallas to come back and play with you guys?
Well, yeah, it's funny, Dallas was the one that actually got me to talk. He was the one that talked to Jason Williamson at the time about it, right? So, Dallas was the one that set me up with it. But that kid, man, he was a workhorse. He played the whole champ. Like I said, I'll take it back to the Cyclone. Like we were down 3-0, and there was the whole rink there was sucked dry of energy. Everybody thought the game was done, and he just decides to go out and score 2 goals and then assist on the final, right? Like he was just so talented, and he was such a good player. And I remember that too. Yeah, he left right after we got back. We had our little party and stuff, and then he went and played in the national championship with Vernon too. But for him, he would give me a little bit of experience, and he kind of opened it that year, like about Vernon, and exploring, getting outside the box and stuff too. Not everybody has to be in trail. There's not only one junior A team to go to, right? So that's where I kind of started to learn that I could branch out of, getting out of trail.
And I guess that's a bit of an interesting dynamic. What you say there is because you've got so many communities so close together that feels like maybe more than it is, because you've got so many different dynamics. But looking out and the experience with the Vipers, I mean, what was your transition like? Because the next season you're with the Vipers, you get recruited by Jason Williamson, but he's not here by the time you sort of kick off your Vernon portion of your career. I mean, did you have any apprehensions about coming in with a new system, or were you just excited to get an opportunity to maybe leave the nest at home a little bit and sort of branch out? Because at this time, I guess you're 17 going on 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was another tough time for me too. I had a couple options of where I was going to go, and I was talking to Jason, and at that time too, my buddies were all starting to come back to trail, so everybody was going to come back. Craig Martin, who was a Viper, he was planning on coming back to trail. Dallas was going to come back to trail, and then at that time, I was like, the trail coach was pushing for me to come back. He was coming over and talking to me and stuff, but I just I wanted to branch out, and get a new experience and try it out. And regardless of what anybody said, I just went for it. I talked to Connor and Kellen. I talked to Travis St. Dennis, who went to Penticton a couple of years. And so I just talked to the guys that had done it in the past, because it's a tough town to come out of. It's a hockey-driven town of people that are diehard Smoke Eater fans, and regardless if you're 17 or 18 years old, they're still going to yell at you when you're on the ice, and that's just the way it is, and that's why it makes it such a good sport and town. But, just getting out and going to Vernon was just such a different experience. And I think getting there was a little tough for me, because the year before, the coaching change had made me leave a team already, right? So me coming in, getting recruited by Jason, and then all of a sudden hearing that he gets fired, and then, I'm sitting there like, oh God, here we go again. This new coach is going to come in and not know anything about me, right? And just cut me or let me go, right? So I have everything in my head, but it all worked out so good, getting Mark coming in, and it was just like such a good experience to branch out and kind of show other people too in this town that if you don't, you're not just done if you don't make one team, right? There's other options to go to.
What's interesting to note too, and I'm sure we'll get back to, we've already done a show with him, so I don't want to focus too much on it, but this is also Jagger Williamson's first year.
Yeah.
To both come in, you're both recruited by somebody else, and now you both have to sort of adjust to a different system. You guys clearly had a bond as you went through your 3 years with Vernon. Did you have that bond right away with Jagger when you guys both got there? I mean, you're a little bit older, but it seemed like as the 3 years would go on, you guys had a pretty big bond. And needless to say, you guys had a phone call while he was at my house a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Right out of the gates, I think it was just a good relationship, you know. I think it took a little while for me I was a shy kid coming in, you know, and didn't really know anybody. And he was a little 16-year-old that everybody loved, right? So it turned into such a good relationship. And after that, like every single year now he's come out to my lake house in the summertime. And, you know, just like, I think having a guy that I started there with, and then, you know, near the end, we were the only two that had been there the whole time, right? So we had so much experience, and it was his first couple years in the league, so I could kind of give him a little guidance on what I had been through already, because I had already been through so much and more, right? So, you know, I just think that having that guy that was a local too, you know, he knew his way around the town. I didn't really know anything about it, so he would help me on the like where to go and stuff. So, you know, we just built such a good relationship that's lasted ever since.
And obviously that season was a pretty good one. I mean, the team was really good coming off the national championship, where obviously it wasn't as successful as the Vipers would have wanted. But they had a talented team. Doing this show sort of takes me back. I'm forced to go back through rosters, and you guys had a heck of a team with Aldworth, and Shiplow was on that team. And, I'm sure I'm going to miss a few. Danny Tadasachuk, who's a Vernon guy, in goal. And, I mean,
Awesome, yeah.
You couldn't have asked for really a better situation. You guys end up rolling. I thought you guys had a really good season overall. But what was that first year like for you in terms of the success? And was there any sort of adjustment on your end when it came to the style of hockey when Mark Ferner gets his systems in place? Did it take you any adjustment from what you learned previously?
I see, like, that year too, like you said, we were so talented that, like, anything Mark put in place that we did, it was going to work. You know, like, just the systems that we had, our defensive core was so dominant. And then Mark was so good at getting in a couple good trades, you know, near the end. And we got in Brandon Egley too, and like just brought in some massive guys. Like we had Liam Coughlin, who was drafted and stuff too. So that year was just such a powerhouse team. And see, like coming in as a kid that was a third, fourth line kind of guy, still would have never ever expected to play as much as I did. You know, I was still given all the opportunities to play in every single role, and that was what Mark was so good at, is that giving everybody the fair advantage. And coming in as a new coach too, he gave everybody to like a chance to, you know, prove themselves. Like everybody's coming in a little nervous, a little on edge about having a new coach coming in, and you know, fair enough, because it's tough. Like you don't know what he's thinking, what he's heard about you or anything, right? So he gave everybody that little leniency, and first couple games gave him the edge to go out and play, right? So thankfully I scored in my first game, so I showed everybody that I could score. But you know, I never had that first year was so awesome for me, that like so nervous moving away from home for the first time, you know, being away from my parents. And then even just like my parents coming down, they would always come in into Vernon, this great hospitality coming in, great set of fans and stuff too, you know, staying close to the rink and everything. It was like a little mini trail. I got set up with the best billets, and Jason and Courtney Casper, you know, they were awesome for me. And I was just so blessed to have that first year because it could have went either way. A lot of guys have came to Vernon, you know, out of trail or even anywhere, gone their first year and hated it so much that they don't want to go back, right? And that was not the case for me whatsoever. I was always excited to go back after every single year that I played there.
You end up finishing with 76 penalty minutes. I sort of want to gloss through that, and we'll end up talking a little bit about it. Your style of play, you know, made you a fan favorite, you know, without question. Did you always play like that? Was that always sort of your philosophy? Obviously, you're not the tallest guy, but you're a pretty solid young man, so it pays dividends for you, and you're extremely fast. Was that always sort of the style of play that you wanted to go with? Again, I don't want to spoil too much of it because we'll sort of revert back to it. But, you know, I imagine that sort of endeared you to the systems and the fans here.
Yeah, no, it was definitely growing up too. I've always been a little bigger, you know, so I've had that build, right? So throughout my major midget career was when I kind of like was able to see that that's the kind of player that I was going to be, right? I could hit guys that were bigger than me, and I've always known that growing up. So I think getting to Vernon too was so cool because like I hadn't played in a stadium basically, right? Like it was so much different coming from trail where there was 200, 300 fans per game to, you know, going to Vernon where there's 2,300 every single night, you know? So just building off that crowd, I think, and, you know, coming in and actually having to show myself. You know, nobody had been able to watch me before. Like nobody, like when I was in BB or when I was going to trail, they had watched me and play in BB. So no, I was coming there. No, not one. I didn't know one single kid either. So I had to really prove myself. And I think that's where like it came in for me that I can prove myself. I'm not going to be able to go out there and score 30 goals. So I might as well go out there and hit and show the guys that I'll do anything for them. Right. So that's the kind of mindset I came in with, that I would just do anything for the guys. And that was why I had such a good, successful year. And like you see a lot of the times too, a lot of those guys that do end up coming in don't end up staying very long too, but I just kind of stuck with it and, just was always trying to give it my best on the ice and hardest at all times too.
That year in 2014-15, you guys end up sweeping Merritt in the first round. The tight series, though, Merritt's under Jonah Emo was outrageously good.
Remember.
Go up against Penticton, and again, I know you're a guy from Trail, but how quickly did you realize, maybe before the Game 7, because we're going to have to talk about Game 7, how much do you sort of have your eyes open to that rivalry that is the Vipers and the Vs, and for you, that's your first kick at it, and how much fun was it?
Yeah, like that was so cool, coming in too, and the year before they had beat them in overtime, right, in Game 7. So just like after that, you had known coming in that that's the matchup. Those are the two best teams in the league. Growing up, it was always the Vipers and the Vs, always the best two teams in the league. So being able to be a part of that rivalry and like going to Penticton, playing against the same group of guys every single night, and the same couple group of guys for 3 years straight, right, was so cool. And everybody loves going to Penticton and playing, and beating them too. That's the best. So just that rivalry too, and they were such a good team. They had Tyson Jones, Dante Fabro, like they were so good. And I think the fact that we knew we could beat them too, and like always being the underdog against the Vs too, right? That's the best part, is going in and they always have something to lose. So I think that was what made it such a good experience playing those guys.
Well, let's walk us through that series. I believe, and I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, you guys were up 3-2. You had a big Game 5 win in Penn, have a chance to close it out at home, near sellout crowd. Ooh, wasn't very good. Penn got up early, forces a Game 7, and what a Game 7 it was. I mean, it was, for me, it was my second Game 7 in as many years in that building. Unlike before, though, this one ends in heartbreak. Unfortunately, your rear end is sort of at the front of that heartbreak. I mean, I remember about that, and we've sort of talked beforehand, moments like that stay with you. Remember about the Patty Sexton goal that ended up moving Penticton on in the postseason?
I can say one thing to this day. All my buddies tell me I scored a goal in Game 7, so that's pretty good, right? But no, I'll never forget that game. I remember Ferns tapping me saying, "Bubs, you're out there." So I hop out there, and I just remember saying, "Just block the puck if it goes to him. That's all you can do," right? So I lined up in the whistle, and it went right back to him, and it was like a little knuckle puck, and it came up, and I turned around, and I slid, and it hit my butt cheek, and I was the only one that could see it. I watched it go 20 feet in the air and then top shelf. And at that point, it was 0-0 game with, a minute and 20 seconds left in Game 7. So I still, to this day, like, I think about that. And when I say I think about it, I genuinely think about it every day. So it's something that, when it comes to your mind, you kind of laugh at it now, but goddamn, was that ever a tough time.
Your 19-year-old year, it was a different season. When we talked with Jagger, and you guys were obviously on that team, it was a different year. Success not really there. Team struggled to make the playoffs. Seemed like but you had a good core of young players. That was the year that Jimmy Lambert was here. Brett Stapley, I think, was here. Steven Jandrick was here. So you had a good core. Jagger, of course, you. But it just seemed like there was two different groups in that. You had some of the older players and the younger players, and the success just wasn't there for whatever reason. What do you remember about your 19-year-old season? We'll sort of gloss through it relatively quickly. For you, pretty good season overall, though. You had 31 points in 53 games, but the team itself struggled to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
It just seemed like there was a ton of adversity. I remember an island road trip that was far from successful. I mean, what were some of the challenges? You go from close to euphoric the year before, how good you guys were, and now all of a sudden, bit of a different story. What do you remember about that season?
Yeah, see that was a tough year too because we were riding such a high from the year before too. We were such a good team, nothing could go wrong. You know, Mark could come in and we were like just as soon as he came in, we were just a straight arrow team for the rest of the year. Always did the right things, and you know, I think coming in, we lost a lot of guys that year. We lost our key group of guys. We lost our entire first line. You know, our captain Riley Gunther, like just a bunch of key guys. Kenny Citron. We lost our goalie. You know, so it was just a tough year. I think, you know, coming in, it was just one of those years that Vernon had been riding such a high for so long. You know, and the year before that, they're hosting the, you know, RBC. So I just think that it was bound to happen, and it wasn't. I think the group of guys just didn't really mix well in the team in the dressing room. In saying that, though, looking back, there was still a lot of guys on that team that I still talk to this day, right? And we had such a good group of team like Jimmy Lambert, like you said, Liam Finley too, even Odeem Tufto. Like we were a really good team, and you know, I just think that in the dressing room, it just all wasn't there, and that was just a year that, you know, went over our heads and forget about it, right?
And that's interesting that you say that again, just because they're great group of guys. Everybody seemed to get along well, but sometimes, you know, it just doesn't translate to nice success, right? You get Penticton again in the postseason. This time you guys go out in 5. It happens to be the first round matchup. When the season ended, what was the big? Was there a crossroads for you? You're at the end of your 19-year-old season. You got 1 year of junior left. That season didn't go the way you wanted it to. How much pressure do you put on yourself in the offseason to come back for your 20-year-old season? And we'll talk about being named a captain in a second, but how much pressure do you put on yourself in the offseason to make sure that this last one, everybody says it, you said it already, it flies by. You're here, you're going into it. How much pressure do you put on yourself to make sure your offseason and this upcoming season was going to be the best one?
Yeah, you know, like this is all you got, right? You don't, especially going into that year when a kid that doesn't have a scholarship, doesn't know what he's going to do with his future. Like for anything, this could be the last season of my career, right? So just going into that summer, even like having such a bitter taste in my mouth about what had happened in the years past, and losing to Penticton twice. You know, my second season, we didn't have the best team in like. So I just think I knew that it was time for a change, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to prove my point, you know, and leave with a bang coming into Vernon, right? So that was, I think, what I put in the back of my head, and worked really hard that summer, like trained really hard to get back into shape, and, you know, came back. And I think our team that year, going in our third year, was a really good team. Yeah.
You get named captain of the team 16-17. I mean, with where you came from and how you got to where you were heading into your final year at junior, did you ever think that you're going to get the tap on the shoulder, that you're going to get a chance to wear the C? You had a great supporting cast with a bunch of A's that year, but I mean, there's some great leaders on that team, and you got an opportunity to wear the C. What'd that mean to you?
Well, you know, it's funny, like just I would always think back about the time that I was even thinking about coming to Vernon, like the thought that I even got a phone call from the Vernon Vipers coach was just like blew my mind. You know, like the Vipers, the V's, you know, all those teams were just something that I never ever would have thought would have been there. You know, so coming in and then all of a sudden looking back on it now and thinking I was the captain of it was just so cool. You know, and being able to just show everybody in my town too that like coming here as a kid that nobody knew, nobody really took a chance on, and just didn't know what was going to happen with me, right? And being able to come to that and say that I earned a captain, and, you know, obviously respect from a lot of people there too. So it was something that to this day I'll be forever blessed about. I still have the jersey to this day, and, you know, I was able to show my grandpa too, who meant a lot to me throughout my career, that, you know, I worked hard, and he was super proud of me at that time too. So that was something that, you know, not only was super good for me, but was also good for my family, and my family was so proud of me at the time too.
In your last year, I mean, the numbers are sort of skewed, right? 34 games in the regular season. There was a suspension in there that was pretty lengthy, 20 if I wasn't mistaken. We can talk about it. We'll try to keep it as PG as possible. But I mean, that was a tough suspension. I mean, the way you played, what goes through your mind when you get the news? I mean, it was the check, I believe it was on Van Unen in a corner against Merritt. I mean, as your career had sort of gone on, did you sort of know this was coming? And when you get the news, first of all, how do you react to something like that? And who supports you? Because obviously in a time like that, you can't change it. You can appeal it, but you can't change it. At the end of the day, support is obviously going to be pretty crucial for you.
Yeah, that was a tough time too, right? Like I remember, I can't remember if it was before or after, but right before I think I had broken my thumb, so it was like just coming back in. I had already missed a bunch of games, so it was terrible. I remember Mark telling me, and I had known that the league was looking at me, and in the 2 previous years I had been suspended lots too, right? I think I had already gotten 8 or 9 games throughout my 2 years of being in Vernon, but just getting the thought of 10 games, that's like we only play 58. I was thinking about that. That's just so much, and it was such a like just a hard thing to take in, is too, especially when you're not injured, right? And especially too when you don't think that you really ever did anything. But like for support, like you said, was Mark Ferner. Like he was right there the whole time. He knew that he and the rest of the team knew that I didn't get what I deserve, or I didn't deserve what I got, right? And that's what I needed. He was always there for me, talking on the phone. I had a conference call with the league, and he was right there too. When they would start talking to me, he would just say, "Hold up a second here, like, you're talking to a kid that's also 19 years old, like just kind of trying to go out there and play hockey." And at the time they had thought that I was trying to go out there and hurt people, but that wasn't what it was about, right? I was just trying to go out there and play the game that I loved, and win, because I hadn't done that ever. So or since juniors, I wanted to do it again in Vernon. So it was just a matter of me going out there and playing as hard as I can. And I think looking back at the hit, I think I could have taken a little bit off, but I still don't really regret it.
So, like, did you ever get tempted to change your style? Like, I mean, you talked about it over the couple of years, the games, the suspensions. I mean, I'm sure there was pressure from higher powers to maybe modify your game a little bit, because that was not something that they were overly pleased with. Clearly, you did, and good on you for sticking through that. But did you ever have like an internal struggle with yourself, like just maybe I should just not?
Yeah.
Were you pretty steadfast in your mind that this is the way that Riley Brandt plays? This is the way he's going to play until he's done?
Yeah, no, I think I kind of just fed that to me. I made it turn me into a little bit more of an animal out there. Just try and go out there and play as hard as I can. I only had a couple games left after I came back from that last suspension, so I just wanted to go out there and play as hard as I could every single night. And just hearing stories from other like coaches, even at that time too, trying to get me suspended, trying to get me out of the league and stuff. I didn't need that in my life, so I just kind of built that into a little bit more energy and try and get me to go out there and work harder for my team.
You finished with a really good record. Again, the team was as good as advertised, and you almost had another dream. You had a dream matchup in the first round of the playoffs. You get the Trail Smoke Eaters in the first round. So in your final year, boy, they were good. So they make the playoffs for the first time in a while.
Yeah,
we've talked about it. I sort of teed you up for this before we started recording. When you got to Trail, and I'm sure a little bit before that, not a whole lot happening, pretty barren building, not a lot of success. Well, in your final year of junior, that's not the case anymore. That place was a fun place to go.
Yeah.
End up taking them out in 5 games. But what was that experience like to go into games that really mattered in front of an environment? And you had your best games against Trail. You scored most of your goals against Trail in your junior A career. I mean, what was that first round matchup like for you?
Yeah, see that was that was the best. There was nothing that I could ever compare that to. Coming back, and I haven't really thought about it in a while. It's like just the time that I had during it, right? Like growing up as a kid, playing in Trail was always what you wanted to do, and now me coming in trying to beat Trail and kick them out of the playoffs was just so mind-blowing to me. But like you said, like when I first started, we would get 200, 300 fans maybe a game, and now all of a sudden there's 3,200 people packed in the Cominco Arena, and we're out there. I'm getting booed at. I'm getting, it doesn't matter. I'm not my dad and grandpa are in the stands wearing Vipers gear, but and I'm staying in my own house after the game. So it was just so cool. And I got all my buddies on that team too. I had so many close, good teammates like Connor. We end up being our 20-year-old year. We started together in Beaver Valley, and next thing you know, we're ending together as captains in, 2 different teams, right? So I just think that that's where everything just kind of came back and was like, holy smokes, this is pretty cool, right? Playing in front of my friends and family. My buddies are up in the booth, cheering me on, but chirping me at the same time. Why not, so that series right there was definitely a highlight of my entire, hockey career for sure.
Well, you mentioned it, the buddies, the guys. Again, that Trail team has a lot of locals on it, but what some don't know, and I tried to throw it in the broadcast whenever I could, you had your cousin playing against you for most of it. Spencer McLean was a cousin. What is it, 2 seasons you guys played head-to-head before you finished up? What was that like? I imagine family dinners on holidays had to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was awesome, too, because I always end up beating them up, so we would always end up winning, right? So, no, that was so cool. And another good buddy of mine, Jeremy Lucchini, he played there for 2 years. Jake Lucchini, Scott Davidson, Craig Martin. These are guys that I'm going golfing with tonight. It was just so cool that now we still have all these stories to look back on and think holy smokes, I played against my cousin for 2 years, and now we're, sitting back in 20 years from now talking about it. So that was good times. Every time I put him on the ice, the family would get up a little bit. So that was the best. That was awesome.
You guys get Penticton third year in a row in the next round, and a little bit different than 2 years prior. You guys are down 3-2. Penn wins in overtime to go up 3-2. You've got a must win at home again. Pretty close to a sellout, over 3,000 people. And boy, this time you guys respond. Cooper Watson scores one from the corner. Darian Hansen puts on a show. Before we talk about the Game 7, what was that experience like? Because, again, you got to experience how fun it was in trail in your hometown, but now you get to experience in your hockey hometown, and that was a pretty special environment in Game 6 there.
Yeah, that game. I still go on YouTube and watch it. They have the entire game there, and that game, every time I watch it, gives me goosebumps. That was just one of those games where we went out there and it was, this is our career here. This is it. This is the last time. If we don't go out there and perform, we'll never be able to be in this dressing room again together. So that was such a cool game because we just went out there and played as hard as we could. What was the score? I think 6-0 by the end, or 6-1 or something.
It was 5-2, 5-1,
something up there, right? So I just think that was one of those games that we just came out there, and the one thing that we were going to do was win, and there was nobody that was going to stop us. I remember the end of the game, we were having the big line brawl, and the whole crowd standing up, and everybody's giving. Oh yeah, that was a really good game. Yeah.
Obviously, tough to not take care of business in Game 7. But you score your last junior hockey goal in Game 7, 3-1 loss, and you could have flipped a coin in a Game 7, right? That's how it works. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be, but we're going to show the last goal that you played in a little clip at the end of the video here. What did it mean to you to be able to get one in your last game of junior hockey, despite the fact the result wasn't what you wanted?
Yeah, no, I remember that too. They scored that third goal, and it was just boys, we still got some time to do something here. And going out there, I think scoring was just kind of gave me a little bit of a slap on the ass and said, you did it. It's part of my language, but you did good, right? So I think that was a good end. Like you said, not the best thing that could ever happen. It was just one of those games. That Game 7, it's just they get a goal. Next thing you know, they get 2 more. It's just that's a Game 7. There's nothing you can do about it. But and definitely getting that goal in that last game makes it something that I can remember for the rest of my life.
The end goal of every junior hockey player who rolls through Junior A and doesn't dabble in the Western League is some form of NCAA or some form of education. And going into that, you didn't have your commitment, but you end up getting a pretty good opportunity with Royal Military College. What did that look like for you? And how happy were you that the hard work that you put in for the previous 4 or 5 years eventually paid off with something? And what was the experience like at Royal Military College for those of us who aren't entirely sure? I know they play in youth sports, but it's a school I would imagine that have some differences than some of the other. sport schools.
Yeah, it was. I just like coming out. You always want the Division I scholarship, but once you finally realize that, like, you know what, going to school to play hockey even is good, right? So, I think getting this thing was a real confidence booster for me, and going there, I was super pumped. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had absolutely no idea. And so I went there, and the first thing we had to do was 3 weeks straight of no phones and just a boot camp, right? So it was definitely difficult, like running every single day, waking up to music at 3, 4 in the morning. And so it was a different experience. But then once I started playing hockey and stuff, like it just kind of changed everything. And that's where I found myself when I was at school, and that was what, I loved to do. So once I got there and finally got back into school, or playing hockey again, all the stuff that I didn't really know if I wanted to do or what I was doing kind of was step aside.
What some people forget is that when you go to school, you're all of a sudden you've got to be a dual threat. You have to be able to execute on the ice, but you have to be able to execute in the classroom. Did you do much schooling in your final year or two with the Vipers, or by the time you got there, besides the boot camp and all that stuff, then the education came, and all of a sudden you got to be on your game in this particular case, form of discipline, education, and athletics. That's a lot to put on a guy.
Yeah, see, and like the benefit for me too was like the year before I did do schooling in Vernon, but I didn't really do it to the best of my abilities. I just kind of, that was for if I was going to NCAA. So going in there, it was basically like I was a fresh student coming, so getting in there, it was good because it's a smaller school. So like the teachers and stuff, like they'll help you out one-on-one and stuff. So I got a lot of help from a lot of the teachers, and a lot of my buddies on my team too that had been in the college for years in the past were able to help me out and stuff. So I had a lot of support system when I was there, but definitely a culture shock, going from having 3 years of just sitting on your butt doing nothing, playing junior hockey, to military camp and now school was definitely a culture change for sure.
But you clearly reacted pretty well to it. I mean, again, I don't know all the accolades because we were tracking it from afar, but you finished your first year at RMC with 21 goals, 12 assists, so you surpassed your career high in junior, 21 goals, 33 points in 28 games, only 18 penalty minutes.
Yeah.
Overall, I mean, clearly you caught fire. You've got a great wrist shot. We've seen it. What went right on the ice? Obviously, everything you sort of laid out for us that you wanted to achieve, you are clearly able to do.
Yeah. See, and like I just like it's kind of all a blur to me now. Like it was. I guess I could give it to being in such good shape from going through the military stuff, right? Like I was in the best shape ever in my life going in. Again, like I just had to go somewhere, didn't know anybody, just had to go there and prove myself. And I think that's just what I did, but I did it the opposite way. I think I just scored goals, and I don't know. It was just a year that I think my game stepped up a notch, and I don't know what I really did, to be honest, but it worked out for the best.
Briefly interrupted by children. Pandemic problems. Hashtag. Riley, we were talking, we just finished off with your first season at RMC where you had such a great offensive year, and then a very tough outcome for you in the offseason. I mean, walk us through what happened. You suffer an injury, can't play at all the next season. I mean, what sort of happened, and what were some of the challenges that a guy faces when it comes down to injuries like that? Were you still able to go to school? What sort of did the off season and your second season look like?
Yeah, it was definitely a difficult time coming off a really good year. So I was fully dedicated to the military, and that's what I wanted to do. So I was staying in Ontario at the time, and I was going on a just ball hockey tournament, and I just took a wrong turn and tore my ACL and meniscus. So it was definitely brutal, getting the news that you're out for 8 to 9 months. So, but I just think I just had to work my hardest at my academics, and just trying to focus on coming back and rehabbing as best as I could in order to get back ready for next season. So just but there was so many times throughout that time too where you're just thinking like, oh, you're never going to get through it. And it was a long, 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 long year, you know, lots of support from my family and stuff too. But I just think that the only thing you can take out of an injury is that, you know, it's always going to get better. Like I said earlier, there's always going to be a bright side eventually. And I just think that going from such a good year to now just focusing on schooling, and that was really it, and not really having the accolades again, not nobody really knowing what's going on with you, what's happening. And it was definitely difficult, but you know, I got through it and here we are.
You get into, at least online, it says you got into a couple of games this season with a few assists. What was the biggest challenge coming back from an injury like that? I guess that's the biggest question. You maybe a little gun shy on it. Maybe it's probably more mental than physical. What sort of hurdles did you have to go through just to get into those 2 games?
Yeah, like, you know, and I rehabbed so hard for an entire year. Last summer I took it really seriously, and I had to focus a lot more on different parts of my body that I hadn't never really focused on, you know, trying to like get the smaller muscles and stuff to get working again, right? Because I was from such a traumatic injury, everything goes down. But I just think, you know, going back, I was a little nervous, but I got, in order that we have a hockey school here that Jagger actually came up, that Terry Jones puts on every year, Champions Hockey School. And, you know, I felt great, felt really good. And it was such a freak accident coming in. And so my second game, I felt good playing 2 games, and I was skating behind the net again, and I tried to stop and start, and my ACL, this guy just came behind and blew it out again. So it was second game in, and I was right back where I was a year before that. So, you know, it's been the toughest 2 years of my life, coming from having all these years of success and playing hockey and doing the thing that I love to now not having skated more than 5 or 6 times over the past 2 years, right? So it's been super challenging, but you know what? I just think that there's so much other things that are going on in this world that are worse, that, you know what, you just gotta have to sit there and realize whatever for a second, you can get through it, and it's gonna be brighter on the other side eventually.
In terms of education at the college, were you still able to do that, you know, right up until, I guess, the pandemic? And what sort of things, I mean, again, we assume, this is just based on assumptions from the military perspective, that things are pretty intense, pretty in your face. The sort of, I don't know if stigma is the right word, is that it's very strict and very strategic, but there's a heck of an education process behind it. And the people who go through this program, they come out with flying colors and job placements and all of these sorts of things. So what sort of things were you're focusing on at school, and how did the college help you get that?
Yeah, the college offers so much. I had such a good experience going from there. My first year, we got to do a lot of military stuff. So we would, for instance, go out in the bush for a night and use a map and compass to try and get us from point A to point B in the middle of the night, you know, and practicing stuff that, you know, that you see in the movies. Like, that's stuff that I got to do, and I can say that I've always done. We went on a 9-day canoe trip once every single night, setting up our tent in a different place along lake in Ontario. So it was just like some of the experiences that I had. One year we got to go down to Army West Point and got to see all of their stuff that they do down there. And let me tell you, if you think Canada's got it bad in the military, it's a little bit more harsh and strict down there for sure. But, you know, got to go down there, watch a game too. And I just think that being injured, I just tried to make the most out of it. I'm doing something that not a lot of people get to do, right? And I'm seeing a lot of different things. You know, a lot of military people come in, and there's always events and stuff going on at the college and stuff. So it was difficult because I wasn't happy at the time. But now that I think about it, there was so much stuff that I took out of it and that I learned from it, you know, while I was there. And so many stories that I can tell my buddies and tell a lot of people that I've done, and that I've been in the military for 3 years now too, right? So
It's a 5-year program, is that correct? When you sign up, most typical schools are like 4. This one's 5, is that correct?
yeah, I was in a different. My first year, I was in it's called the Aboriginal Leadership Opportunity Year. So it's a year of basically like they bring in people that have Aboriginal status and give them schooling and do basically the same thing the rest of the college is doing. But it was basically to see if I liked it, and then I eventually went on into the program. But just this past couple weeks, I've decided I'm not going back, and I'm gonna next year I'm gonna try and go to MacEwan University. So
well, that sort of segues into what's next. Again, what were you pursuing academically? When it comes down to it, is hockey still an option after the injuries and sort of as you said, sort of the rehab summers that you've had? It seems to be the way it's gone for you the last couple of years.
It's been a
is hockey still in the cards for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I just think I'm gonna have to dedicate myself a lot more to it. And now that I know I have an injury, right? Like, this is something that's gonna be with me for the rest of my life. I'm not gonna go out on my hockey career on 2 years of not playing. So I'm gonna try and play in one more year here and see what I can do. And a fresh start for me going to MacEwan University hopefully is gonna work out. And depending on everything that's going on in the world, right? But I just think a fresh start for me now and being able to start like free again, like just forget about my knee injury, forget about what had happened in the past, and when I was at RMC, I was just taking Bachelor of Arts. So I was just in an arts program. So hopefully that can transfer over into MacEwan. If not, then I'll probably take another year general arts. But I'm just right now in the past couple of years, it's been so hard for me to plan. I'm kind of just trying to ride and see where I go with my knee and with my injury, and wherever it takes me, and with schooling, and just keep doing my schooling, see what I can get for myself.
It's a pretty crazy story. I've learned a lot. I've only, seen your growth from 2014, 15 onwards. So, 3 seasons, but there have been lots of ups and downs throughout the course of your hockey career in general. And people don't get through stuff like that, specifically the suspensions, the injuries, the trades, the coach firings, all of that sort of thing, without a support system. I mean, I had a chance to meet your dad. I might have met your mother. I believe I've met your grandparents. I mean, fantastic people. What can you say about the family aspect of this thing and how important they are to who you were and who you've become?
Yeah, my family has always been a massive part of my life. My mom and my dad have always been there throughout the start of my career, right? So I never would have been able to build up the confidence even to leave Trail and go on and play in a different place, right? If it weren't for them. So, I'm forever grateful for that too. And unfortunately, a year ago, my grandpa passed away, and he was a big, big part of my life. So he was the rock in my hockey career too. And that's where I think, these past couple injuries here, I'm just going to have to fight through it, because I'm going to do it for him and, prove him that I can still, go on with my hockey career. And because that's what he loved to watch me do, that was his life, was me playing hockey. So just keep on going here. And, my family's always been my rock.
You were a 3-year Vernon Viper. You weren't from there, but you're one of, there's always guys that come in from other places and get embraced as a Vernonite, somebody who's, embraces the culture, embraces the fans, and your name's definitely on that list. Do you have anything that you want to say? Because we know that the Vernon Viper fans, whether you were suspended, they had your back just as much as the coaching staff, and then everybody did. Do you have anything you sort of want to share with them as we wrap up the interview?
Yeah, of course. Vernon, since I moved there, I have and always will consider it my second home. The fans, I still get posts on Facebook from some of them, just like saying, how's it going? Like, what a good player, what a good guy he was, so overall, I would like to say thank you for the 3 years that I was there. I never really got to say that when I was leaving. So this is a good opportunity for me to do that. And, just the support that I had from them over the years, and our team, they would always, regardless if we're winning or losing, we were always getting good fans, always watching the videos and stuff that we would do throughout the year, if we were the goofy stuff, and, going around giving out season tickets, and to all the billet families and stuff too, all the billet coordinators that are there and that work so hard for like kids that are, 16 to 20 years old. They're not really that easy to deal with, so there's a lot of people inside the organization too that are helped out so much that don't really get the accolades like the players and stuff really do, and I think that was such a good experience about Vernon, is seeing how many people really do care about the organization and the fans especially too. So, yeah.
Well, Riley, we really appreciate the time. This is very cool to connect with you. You're not the first person to mention that you know, you get to think about things and share some things with people who, you know, all of a sudden the season's over and everybody goes their own way. We really appreciate the time. We wish you all the best on the recovery and next season, whatever that holds for you. And we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Graham.
Tough to, his pass for Sacco just missed as he was wide open in front. And now Lane Gillis has to move it, but he turns it over. Here's a chance for Riley Brandt. Brandt in tight, he shoots, he scores! The Warriors can't clear a puck past their blue line in transition. Riley Brandt goes far post and in. And at 4:55, the Vipers take a 1-0 lead. And they score off the faceoff. Riley Brandt with a quick shot off the draw. And the Vipers have tied it up. You blink, you missed it. It's 2-2.
Zandy stick handling into the zone. Drop pass for Gingras. Back in front. Quick shot, scores! Riley Brandt with a hot shot from the right circle. Gingras with a nice move to leave it for the Viper captain.
Here's Miller trying to skate himself out. He turns it over. Lansdale in front. Drop pass. Brandt scores! Riley Brandt off a turnover. And the Viper faithful next to the Viper bench have something to cheer about as the Viper captain gets them on the board. And that's all they need. One on the board. And with 9:34 the time of the goal, maybe the Vipers have some life.